Here's the voiceover script for Story Sphere. A black man on a $68 million jet? Please, you probably clean the seats for a living. She laughed right in his face. A loud, nasty, theatrical laugh. Hey, I've served actual billionaires. They don't look like you. Hairpin cracked across his cheek before he could even respond. The sound echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. His espresso didn't even tremble in his hand. His name was Curtis Henderson. He looked at her with the quietest eyes she'd ever seen, and said, almost in a whisper. You done? Donne. She smirked. Get off this plane before I call the cops. He took a slow sip of his espresso. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. In 8 minutes, she'd understand everything. And right now, you need to keep watching. Because what happens next? Nobody sees coming. Welcome to Story Sphere. Let's get into it. But before we get to those 8 minutes, let me take you back to the beginning. Because this story doesn't start with a slap. It starts with a man who had absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. Friday afternoon. October. The kind of golden autumn light that turns everything in New Jersey into a painting. Teterboro Airport. Not the terminal you and I walk through. This is the private side. The side with marble floors, leather couches, and espresso machines that cost more than most people's cars. This is where billionaires come and go like ghosts. No lines, no TSA. No one asks you to take off your shoes. You just walk straight onto your plane. And that's exactly what Curtis Henderson planned to do. His black SUV pulled up to the terminal at 4:15. No motorcade, no entourage. Just Curtis in the driver's seat and his chief of operations, Derek Moore, riding shotgun. Curtis stepped out wearing a black hoodie, dark jeans, and plain white sneakers. No Rolex, no gold chain, no designer logo screaming for attention. If you passed him on the street, you'd never guess this man was worth $2.3 billion. And that was the whole point. Curtis had stopped dressing for other people's expectations a long time ago. He didn't need a three-piece suit to close a deal. He didn't need a flashy watch to prove his bank account. He built Pinnacle Aero Holdings from a single leased cargo plane into a private aviation empire that spanned 6 countries. The planes spoke for themselves. He walked into the FBO lounge and the woman behind the front desk smiled wide. Mr. Henderson, good to see you again. He called her by her first name, asked about her daughter's soccer tournament, left a folded $100 bill on the counter like it was nothing. Because to him, kindness was never nothing. The ground crew waved from the tarmac. One of them jogged over to shake his hand. Your bird's all fueled up, sir. Looking beautiful today. Curtis grinned. She always does. His phone buzzed. A call from his CFO about an $800 million acquisition of a regional airline. Curtis talked while walking, his voice low and steady. No dramatics, no shouting, just clean, surgical decision-making. Lock the term sheet. We closed Tuesday. That was it. 4 words. $800 million. Derek shook his head, smiling. You know, one day you could actually dress like you own a jet. Curtis laughed. A real, warm laugh. If I have to dress a certain way for people to respect me, those aren't people I need respect from. Remember that line. It's going to matter. Now, here's where the trouble starts. Curtis's regular cabin crew, 2 flight attendants who'd been with him for years, called in sick that morning. Bad shrimp from a team lunch. Both of them down. No backup on short notice. So Pinnacle's operations team scrambled and contracted a replacement crew from Skyline Private Charters. A last-minute fill. A company Curtis had used before for overflow staffing, but never on his personal aircraft. Esquilani sent 2 attendants. One of them was Brenda Lawson. Brenda was 32. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, dressed uniform, polished shoes. She arrived at the FBO with her colleague 20 minutes early, which normally would be a good sign. But the cracks showed fast. She snapped at a ground crew member for placing a catering cart 6 inches too far to the left. She sighed loudly when her colleague asked a simple question about the galley layout. And when a black baggage handler approached to confirm luggage details, she didn't even look at him. Just waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. Small moments. Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But they painted a very clear picture. She stepped onto the Gulf Stream and froze for half a second. The interior was stunning. Hand-stitched leather, African art on the cabin walls, a framed photograph of Curtis with civil rights leaders and community organizers. She looked at the photo. Her nose wrinkled, just slightly. Just enough. She'd been told the client would board soon. No name, no photo, no briefing on who he was. Just, the client. In her mind, she already had an image of who owned this plane. And that image didn't look anything like the man in the black hoodie who was about to walk up those stairs. Curtis climbed the air stairs with the casual ease of a man walking into his own living room. Because that's exactly what this was. His plane, his space, his rules. It ducked slightly through the cabin door. 6'2", broad shoulders. The hoodie made him look even bigger. His worn leather messenger bag hung from one shoulder. It smelled like cedar cologne and fresh autumn air. Brenda was in the galley arranging glasses on a polished silver tray. She heard footsteps and turned around. And then she saw him. A black man. Hoodie. Jeans. Sneakers. Standing in the doorway of a $68 million aircraft. Her whole body changed. Her shoulders pulled back. Her chin lifted. Her eyes narrowed into two thin, suspicious lines. The warm, professional smile she'd been rehearsing in the mirror that morning vanished completely. She stepped into the aisle, blocking his path. No greeting, no welcome, no good afternoon, sir. Nothing. Excuse-me. Her voice was flat. Can I help you? Are you with the ground crew? Curtis had heard this question before. More times than he could count. At hotel lobbies, at car dealerships, at restaurants where he had a standing reservation. It always sounded the same. Polite on the surface. Poison underneath. It kept his face neutral. No, I'm the passenger. He moved forward. She didn't move. I'm going to need to see some identification. She planted her feet wider. We can't just have anyone walking onto this aircraft. Anyone. That word hung in the recycled cabin air like smoke. 5 minutes earlier, a white catering delivery driver had walked onto the same plane carrying trays of food. Brenda hadn't asked him for so much as a name. He walked right in, sat down the trays, and walked right out. No questions, no ID, no suspicion. Nothing. But the black man in the hoodie? It was anyone. Stay with us on Storysphere? Good. Because this is where it gets serious. Stay right here. Curtis didn't argue. He pulled out his phone and showed her the boarding manifest. His name, the tail number, the departure time, the destination. Everything matched. Everything was right there in black and white. Brenda glanced at it for less than 2 seconds. Anyone could have that screenshot. She waved the phone away with the back of her hand. I need a government-issued ID. A real one. Her tone had shifted. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was an accusation. She was looking at him the way a store detective looks at a shoplifter. Like guilt was already decided, and paperwork was just a formality. Curtis reached into his messenger bag, pulled out his wallet, handed her his New Jersey driver's license. Photo, full name, address in Alpine, one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. Brenda held the ID up, studied it, looked at the photo, looked at Curtis, looked at the photo again, looked at the cabin interior, looked back at Curtis. Her brain was fighting itself. The name matched. The face matched. The address was Alpine, for God's sake. But something in her refused to accept it. Something deep and ugly that she'd carried her whole life told her that this man could not possibly belong here. She held the ID for an uncomfortably long time. 15 seconds. 20. Curtis stood there, patient, his hand still extended. Finally, Derek leaned forward from his seat. Everything all right up there? Brenda ignored him. She turned away from Curtis without returning his ID and pulled out her phone. She called Skyline Dispatch and she didn't even try to lower her voice. Yeah, this is Brenda on the Teterboro assignment. There's a gentleman here claiming to be the client. She paused. Something doesn't feel right. I just want to make sure we're safe. Safe. That word hit Curtis in the chest like a fist. He didn't show it, but he felt it. That word, safe, was a weapon disguised as a whisper. It meant dangerous. It meant threat. It meant this black man scares me simply by existing in this space. Derek's jaw tightened. He set down his water glass slowly. His eyes locked onto Brenda with a look that could have melted steel. The dispatcher on the other end confirmed everything. Curtis Henderson, owner-passenger, Pinnacle Aero Holdings. Confirmed. No ambiguity. No question. None. Brenda hung up. She stood there for a moment, phone still in her hand. Did she apologize? Nor did she say, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, sir? Nor did she smile, offer a handshake, anything even remotely resembling basic human decency? No. She just shrugged, handed back his ID without looking at him, and said in the flattest, most disrespectful tone imaginable, all right. You can sit down. Not, please have a seat, Mr. Henderson. Not, welcome aboard, sir. Used. You can sit down. Like she was doing him a favor. Like she was granting permission for a man to sit on his own plane. Curtis took his ID back, said nothing, walked to his seat, sat down. Derek leaned over and whispered, You okay? Curtis gave a small nod. His face was stone. But behind his eyes, a clock had started ticking. Brenda began the pre-flight service. And this is where the abuse shifted from obvious to surgical. She poured Derek a glass of water without being asked, sat it down gently on a linen napkin, even gave him a small, tight-lipped smile. Then she walked right past Curtis, like his seat was empty, like he was invisible. Curtis waited a moment. Then he said calmly, Could I get a sparkling water, please? Brenda sighed. Not a quiet sigh. A loud, theatrical, full-body sigh that said everything her words didn't. We'll get to it. She never got to it. Next, she picked up Curtis's leather messenger bag, a bag that had been with him for 15 years, soft and worn with memory, and tossed it into the overhead bin. Not placed. Not set down. Tossed. Like it was a garbage bag. Curtis watched it hit the inside of the bin with a dull thud. He said nothing. Then Brenda adjusted the cabin thermostat, dropped it to 62 degrees without asking. The cabin turned cold within minutes. Curtis felt the chill settle across his arms. Still, he said nothing. AH was small. AH1 was deniable. Oh, I forgot your water. Oh, I didn't realize the bag was yours. Oh, I thought everyone preferred it cool. But stacked together, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't neglect. It was theater. Every cold shoulder, every dismissive sigh, every rolled eye was a performance. And the audience was Curtis. She wanted him to feel it. She wanted him to know he didn't belong. Then came the line that broke the dam. Curtis asked about meal service. A simple, reasonable question from a passenger on his own aircraft. Brenda turned, looked at him, and delivered the words with the full weight of every assumption she'd been carrying since the moment she saw his face. Sir, I don't know who let you on this plane, but this aircraft is reserved for the owner. You need to leave now. Even after the ID check, even after dispatch confirmed his identity, even after seeing his name on the manifest, she had decided, with absolute, unshakable conviction, that a black man in a hoodie could not own this plane. Curtis locked eyes with her. The cabin was silent. The air was still. You could hear the faint hum of the auxiliary power unit outside. He spoke calmly, quietly, like a man who had said these words 1,000 times before and was tired of how familiar they felt. I am the owner. Brenda scoffed. Not a polite scoff. A full, head tilted, lip curled, contemptuous scoff. The kind of scoff that said, I don't believe you. He will never believe you, and nothing you say will change that. Right. She crossed her arms. And I'm the Queen of England. Derek's hand gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles went pale. His chest was rising and falling fast. He wanted to speak. He wanted to stand. He wanted to say something that would crack this woman's arrogance in half. But Curtis raised one finger. Use Twan. Without even looking at Derek. Not yet. The clock was still ticking. Brenda wasn't done. She was just getting started. Something had shifted behind her eyes. She'd crossed a line in her own mind, the line where suspicion becomes certainty. She was no longer wondering if Curtis belonged here. She had decided, completely and permanently, that he did not. And now she was going to do something about it. She straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and stepped directly in front of Curtis's seat like a security guard at a velvet rope. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Her voice was low now, controlled, dangerous. Step off this aircraft until we get this sorted out. He will not be responsible for an unauthorized person on a plane this valuable. A nose erased. Curtis looked up at her from his seat. His hands were resting on his knees, open, relaxed, entretenido. He spoke without raising his voice even a fraction. I'm not going anywhere. This is my plane. You are on my payroll right now. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Brenda blinked. For half a second, just half, something flickered across her face. Doubt. Fear. The faintest crack in her armor. But she sealed it shut immediately. Your plane. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Sure it is. And I suppose you built the whole airline, though. I did. The simplicity of his answer shook her more than any argument could have. She expected defensiveness. She expected anger. She expected him to pull up bank statements or shout his net worth at her. That's what she wanted. A reaction she could twist into justification. But Curtis gave her nothing. Used two words, spoken like facts, spoken like gravity. It infuriated her. Brenda spun on her heel and marched toward the cabin door. She leaned out into the golden afternoon light and scanned the tarmac. An airport police vehicle was idling near the fuel station, 30 yards away. She raised her hand and waved it down. Officer Ronald Bates rolled up in his white SUV, window down, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked relaxed. Enough of a quiet shift. What's the problem, ma'am? Brenda leaned into the window. Her voice dropped into that particular register. The one designed to sound frightened, helpless, urgent. The voice of a woman who knows exactly how to weaponize her fear. Officer, there's an unauthorized individual on this aircraft. He's refusing to leave. He's getting aggressive. Aggressive. Curtis Henderson had not raised his voice once. Had not stood up, had not pointed a finger, made a fist, or taken a single step toward her. He was sitting in a leather seat with his hands on his knees and his espresso cooling on the side table. But the word aggressive did exactly what Brenda needed it to do. Batis unclipped his seatbelt. His hand moved instinctively to his belt. Not quite to his weapon, but close enough. He climbed out of the SUV and followed Brenda up the air stairs. The cabin felt smaller with Bates inside it. It was a big man. 40-something, thick neck, the kind of officer who'd spent 20 years in law enforcement and had heard every story twice. His boots were heavy on the carpet. He looked at Curtis, looked at Brenda, back at Curtis. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside for a moment." Curtis didn't move. His voice was level, measured, almost gentle. "Officer, my name is Curtis Henderson. I own this aircraft. You're welcome to verify that with the FAI registry, the FBO front desk, or the tail number on the fuselage right outside that window." It pointed toward the oval window. Through it, clear as day, the Pinnacle Aero Holdings logo gleamed on the fuselage in midnight blue and silver. The tail number was right there. 5 characters that could end this entire scene in 30 seconds. Batis hesitated. His eyes moved to the window. He saw the logo. He saw the tail number. Something in his gut told him to pause, to check, to ask one more question before this went any further. But Brenda was right behind him, whispering, feeding the fire. "Officer, he's been confrontational since the moment he boarded. I've already called dispatch and they couldn't confirm anything. I don't feel safe." That was a lie. Dispatch had confirmed everything. But Brenda had rewritten the story in her own mind. And now she was rewriting it for Bates. Batis turned back to Curtis. "Sir, I understand, but I need you to stand up for me, just to sort this out." He moved toward Curtis. His posture shifted. Wider stance, hands slightly forward. The universal body language of a pat-down about to happen. Curtis looked at the officer's hands. He understood what was coming. A black man on a private jet about to be frisked on his own property because a white woman said the word aggressive. He'd seen this movie before. 100 times, 1,000 times, on the news, in his own life. The script never changed. That's when Derek stood up. He rose from his seat slowly, deliberately. His 6-foot frame straightened to its full height. His voice came out clear and sharp, like a blade leaving a sheath. "Officer, my name is Derek Moore. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Pinnacle Aero Holdings, the company that owns this aircraft. The man you are about to put your hands on is Curtis Henderson, the founder, the CEO, and the sole owner of this $68 million plane." He paused. Let it sink in. "Now, before you take one more step, I need you to understand something." Derek pointed to the ceiling. 3 small black domes. Cabin security cameras, positioned at the front, midley, and rear of the aircraft. Red lights glowing steady. Every single second since we boarded this aircraft has been recorded. Audio and video. Triangles. Cloud synced in real time to our corporate servers. So whatever happens next, officer, I want you to know. The whole world is going to see it. The cabin went dead silent. Batis froze. His hands dropped to his sides like they'd been burned. He stared at the cameras, then at Derek, then at Curtis. The red lights blinked back at him. Patient. Unblinking. Unforgiving. Brenda's face changed. Not much, but enough. The cameras were a variable she hadn't considered. She'd built her whole performance on the assumption that it was her word against his. Her credibility against his. Her tears against his truth. But cameras don't care about tears. Cameras just record. For 5 long seconds, no one moved. The only sound was the low hum of the plane's auxiliary power unit and the distant whine of a jet taxiing somewhere on the runway. Then Brenda did something that would cost her everything. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was years of unchecked hatred finally boiling over with nowhere left to hide. Whatever it was, it took control of her body before her brain could stop it. She turned to Curtis. Her face was red. Her jaw was tight. Her voice came out low and venomous, shaking with a fury she no longer tried to disguise. You people always have some story, don't you? She stepped closer. You probably stole the money to buy this thing, or sold drugs, or scammed someone. The words filled the cabin like poison gas. Derek took a step forward. Baptiste put his hand up. Curtis didn't move. He simply stood. Not aggressively, not quickly. He just rose from his seat to his full height, 6'2", and looked down at her with an expression that carried 30 years of this. 60 years of being doubted, questioned, frisked, followed, denied. We're done here. Get off my plane. And Brenda slapped him. Open palm. Full force. Across his left cheek. The crack echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Baptiste flinched. Derek lunged forward but stopped himself. The espresso cup rattled on the side table. Curtis' head turned slightly with the impact. A red mark bloomed across his dark skin. Warm. Stinging. Familiar in a way it should never be. He didn't touch his face. Didn't they raise his hand? Didn't they step back? He looked at her. Then he looked up, slowly, deliberately, at the security camera directly above her head. Its red light pulsed like a heartbeat. Then he looked back at her, and he smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that says, I know something you don't. The kind of smile that makes your blood run cold. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. In 8 minutes, she'd understand everything. Curtis sat back down. Slowly. Calmly. Like a man who had all the time in the world. Brenda stood there, breathing hard. Her palms still tingling from the slap. She expected him to shout, to lunge, to give her the reaction she needed to justify everything she'd done. Instead, he picked up his phone. And that's when her world started to end. First call. His personal attorney. Curtis spoke like he was ordering room service. No emotion, no urgency. Used facts. Andrew, it's Curtis. I need you to pull up the live feed from my aircraft, cabin camera 3. You see an assault that occurred approximately 90 seconds ago. Yes, on me. I want charges filed within the hour. Battery, false police report, whatever else applies. A post, listened. Thank you. I hold the footage on my end as well. He hung up. Brenda watched him. Her smirk was still there, but it had frozen. Like a mask that no longer fit her face. Second call. Pineceleros, head of vendor relations. James, pull every active contract we hold with Skyline Private Charters. I love them. Every subsidiary. Every division. I want termination letters drafted and sent before close of business today. The voice on the other end asked a question. Curtis answered without hesitation. All of them. Effective immediately. No exceptions. He hung up again. Brenda's smirk was gone now. The word Skyline had landed like a rock through a window. That was her company. Her employer. The name on her paycheck. Her lips parted slightly. No words came out. Third call. This one Curtis made while looking directly at Brenda. He didn't break eye contact. Not once. Guy. It's Curtis Henderson. On the other end, Gail Townsend, Senior Vice President of Skyline Private Charters, answered immediately. Curtis was a $14 million a year client. When he called, you picked up before the second ring. Gail, I'm currently sitting on my aircraft at Teterboro. One of your crew members has spent the last 30 minutes racially profiling me. Questioning my right to be on my own plane. filing a false police report claiming I was aggressive. And about 2 minutes ago, physically striking me across the face. Silence on the other end. Curtis let it breathe. The entire incident has been captured on 3 cabin security cameras. Audio and video. My legal team is reviewing the footage as we speak. I'm going to need a callback within 10 minutes, Gail. If I don't get one, our entire relationship is over. I'll 14 million of it. He hung up. Set the phone down on the armrest. Folded his hands, and waited. The cabin was so quiet, you could hear Brenda's breathing. Fast. Shallow. The kind of breathing that happens when your body realizes the danger before your brain does. Officer Bates had been standing near the cabin door the entire time. Silent. Watching. His hand had long since dropped away from his belt. He wasn't looking at Curtis anymore. He was looking at his own phone. Eddie typed the tail number into the FAI registry. The result came back in 3 seconds. Aircraft registered to Pinnacle Aero Holdings LLC. He searched for the company name. Curtis Henderson, founder and CEO. Forbes list. 2.3 billion net worth. Presidential Medal of Freedom nominee. Photos of him with senators, governors, and Fortune 500 executives. Bates looked up from his phone. His face had gone pale. The color had drained out of it like water from a cracked glass. He turned to Brenda. His voice was different now. Quieter. Heavier. Ma'am. Brenda's head snapped toward him. What? Is the one who? Ma'am. Bates cut her off. His tone left no room for negotiation. The aircraft owner has asked you to leave. You are now trespassing on private property. And based on what I just witnessed, you are potentially facing assault charges. Step off the plane. Now. Brenda's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. She looked at Curtis. She looked at Bates. She looked at Derek, who was sitting with his arms crossed and an expression that said, I told you so, without a single word. She looked at the cameras. All 3 red lights. Still blinking. Still recording. Still watching. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from her supervisor at Scalene. Call me immediately. Do not speak to the client. Then another buzz. An email from Scalene Human Resources. Subject line, immediate suspension pending investigation. Then another buzz. Another email. Same sender. Different subject line. Termination of employment, effective immediately. 3 bases. 7 seconds. Querido ver. Brenda stared at her phone screen. Her hand was trembling so hard the words blurred. Her legs felt hollow. The polished confidence she'd worn like armor all afternoon had crumbled into dust. She looked at Curtis one last time. He was sitting exactly where he'd been since the beginning. Same set, same posture, same quiet, devastating calm. His espresso was still on the side table. The red mark on his cheek was still visible. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She walked off the plane on legs that barely held her. Each step down the airstairs felt like falling. The golden afternoon light hit her face. But it didn't feel warm anymore. 8 minutes from slap to jobless. He told her. She just didn't listen. Brenda's heels hit the tarmac and her knees almost buckled. The late afternoon sun was still golden. The air still smelled like jet fuel and autumn leaves. Everything outside the plane looked exactly the same as it had 30 minutes ago. But Brenda Lawson's entire world had been rearranged. She stood at the bottom of the airstairs clutching her phone with both hands, staring at the termination email like the words might rearrange themselves if she looked long enough. They didn't. Officer Bates followed her down. His boots were heavy on each step. His face was set in the grim expression of a man who had just realized he'd been played, and had almost made the worst mistake of his career. He stopped in front of Brenda. Pulled out his notepad. His voice was flat and official. "Ma'am, based on what I directly witnessed inside that aircraft, I'm placing you under arrest for simple assault and filing a false police report." Brenda's head jerked up. "Arrest? No. No, no, no. You don't understand." It provoked me. He was intimidating. He felt threatened. He was just doing my job. Bates didn't blink. "Ma'am, I watched the entire interaction." He was seated. His hands were visible. He never raised his voice. "You struck him. It was a mistake." "It was. I didn't mean to. It just happened." "Turn around, please. Hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was small and metallic. But on that quiet tarmac, surrounded by nothing but private jets and silence, it sounded enormous. Two ground crew members stood near a fuel truck watching. They seen the whole thing unfold through the aircraft windows. One of them shook his head slowly. The other pulled out his phone and started recording. Brenda was walked across the tarmac toward Bates' patrol vehicle. Her pressed uniform was wrinkled now. Her blonde bun was coming loose. Strands of hair stuck to her face where tears had started to fall. She was crying. Hard. Ugly. The kind of crying that bends your whole body. "Please. Please. I can't. I have bills. I have rent. I just lost my job. You can't do this." It was a misunderstanding. Bates opened the rear door of his SUV. "You should have thought about that before you put your hands on someone." He guided her into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy thud. Through the tinted window, Brenda's face was barely visible. Just the shape of a woman bent forward, shoulders shaking. Back on the plane, the cabin was still. Curtis sat in his seat. The red mark on his cheek had deepened into a bruise. He pressed a cold water bottle against it. Not because it hurt that much, but because it gave his hands something to do. Derek sat across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The engines hummed softly. The cameras blinked their steady red. Finally, Derek broke the silence. "You okay?" Curtis was quiet. He stared out the oval window at the tarmac. At the patrol vehicle pulling away with Brenda in the back. At the ground crew returning to their routine like the world hadn't just cracked open inside that cabin. "I'm tired, Derek." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Not of her. I'm tired of the fact that this keeps happening." Derek nodded. He didn't say anything else. Some truths don't need a response. They just need a witness. Curtis pulled out his phone and called his wife. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey. Something happened on the plane today. I'm Fine. I'll tell you everything when I get home." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Was it bad?" "Yeah." Another pause. "Come home safe, Curtis." 3 words. But they carried the weight of every time he'd walked out the door, and she'd wondered if the world would treat him like a man or like a threat. Come home safe. 40 minutes later, Gail Townsend pulled into Teterboro in a black sedan. She'd driven from Skyline's headquarters in Connecticut at 90 miles an hour. Her face was the color of chalk. She asked to see Curtis. Curtis refused. Derek met her on the tarmac instead. He handed her a single envelope. Inside was a formal letter on the Pinnacle Aero letterhead. Termination of all contracts between Pinnacle Aero Holdings and Skyline Private Charters, effective immediately. Total annual value, $14 million across 6 subsidiaries. Gail read it twice. Her hands shook. She looked up at Derek. Is there anything at all we can do to? No. Derek turned and walked back up the air stairs. The cabin door closed behind him. Gail stood alone on the tarmac, holding a letter worth $14 million in losses, and realized that one employee's hatred had just set her company on fire. The footage hit the internet on a Monday morning. Curtis's legal team released the cabin video after Brenda's attorney went on a local news segment and told the anchor, with a straight face, that Curtis had been combative and physically threatening during the encounter. That was a mistake. A catastrophic, irreversible, career-ending mistake. Because the video showed everything. All three angles. Crystal clear. Full audio. 26 minutes of uncut, unedited truth. The ID check. The scoff. The dispatch call. The microaggressions. The water she never brought. The bag she tossed. The word unauthorized. The word aggressive. The phrase, you people. And then, the slap. That sharp, unmistakable crack of an open palm against a man's face. Followed by the quietest 4 words the internet had ever heard. You done? TV journalist Nina Collins broke the story on the national evening news. She played the footage with minimal commentary. She didn't need much. The video spoke for itself. Within 12 hours, it had 10 million views. By Wednesday, 20 million. By Friday, it was everywhere. Every news desk, every talk show, every group chat, every social media feed in the country. The hashtags wrote themselves. Hashtag 8 minutes. Hashtag Curtis Henderson. Hashtag justice served. Hashtag Brenda Lawson. People were furious. Not the quiet, scrolling past kind of furious. The kind that calls congresspeople. The kind that cancels subscriptions. The kind that shows up. And the first place they showed up was Skyline's front door. Within 1 week of the footage going public, 3 of Skyline's top-tier clients pulled their contracts. Then 4 more. Then a cascade. Private jet owners, corporate accounts, charter brokers who didn't want their names anywhere near the scandal. Total losses in the first 2 weeks. $43 million in annual revenue. Gone. Evaporated like jet fuel in the sun. But the money was only the beginning. An internal investigation at Skyline, launched under pressure from their own board of directors, uncovered something worse. Brenda Lawson had 3 prior complaints from clients of color. 3. All documented. All buried by middle management. One client had written a detailed letter describing how Brenda had refused to serve him and called security when he asked for a blanket. That letter sat in a filing cabinet for 2 years. No one acted on it. When Nina Collins reported this on her follow-up segment, the second scandal exploded. It wasn't just about Brenda anymore. It was about the system that protected her. Guy Townsend was forced to resign within the month. The CEO of Skyline issued a public apology. A carefully worded, PR-approved statement about deeply held values and zero tolerance. The internet didn't buy it for a second. Esquilani announced mandatory bias training for all employees. An independent review board. A victim compensation fund. Crisis consultants. Diversity hires. Too little. Too late. The court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict. But the legal courts were just getting started. The district attorney's office in Bergen County charged Brenda Lawson with assault in the 3rd degree and filing a false police report. Both misdemeanors. Both carrying potential jail time. Brenda's attorney, a man named Scott Pryor, with slicked back hair and a reputation for getting people off on technicalities, tried to negotiate a plea deal. Community service. No jail time. A sealed record. He argued that Brenda was under extreme stress and had no prior criminal history. The DA wasn't interested. The case had become national news. 20 million people had watched the video. The pressure to prosecute fully was enormous. Not because of politics, but because the evidence was undeniable. There was no ambiguity. No, he said, she said. There was a camera. 3 cameras. And they captured everything. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution played the video on a 6-foot screen in the courtroom. They played it 3 times. 11 at normal speed. 11 slowed down. 11 with audio enhanced so the jury could hear every word Brenda whispered to Officer Bates. Every lie. Every fabrication. Every calculated attempt to weaponize fear against a man who had done nothing but exist in his own space. Brenda took the stand on day 3. Her attorney had coached her well. She cried. She trembled. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue and told the jury she didn't see color and that she was just trying to do her job. The prosecution asked one question on cross-examination. Ms. Lawson, if the man who boarded that aircraft had been white, wearing the same hoodie, same jeans, same sneakers, would you have asked him for identification? Brenda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. He would have treated anyone the same way. The prosecutor nodded. Then played a clip from earlier in the footage. The white catering driver walking onto the same aircraft. No questions asked. No ID requested. Not even a second glance from Brenda. The jury watched in silence. Brenda's attorney closed his eyes. Day 4. Verdict. Guilty. Both counts. Assault in the 3rd degree. Filing a false police report. The judge, Patricia Wells, a 20-year veteran of the Bergen County bench, delivered the sentence without fanfare. 18 months probation. 300 hours of community service. Mandatory bias rehabilitation program. A permanent criminal record. And a lifetime ban from working in the aviation industry. Brenda stood in the courtroom with her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't cry this time. She just stared at the floor like it might open up and swallow her whole. It didn't. But the civil case was still coming. Curtis filed a lawsuit against both Brenda Lawson and Skyline Private Charters. Racial discrimination, assault, emotional distress, negligent hiring and supervision. Skyline's lawyers took one look at the footage, one look at the prior complaints they'd buried, and one look at the public sentiment, and they settled out of court. $3.2 million. Curtis took every penny of that settlement and donated it. I love it. $1.5 million to HBCU scholarship funds. $1 million to civil rights legal defense organizations. The remaining $700,000 to a mentorship program for young black entrepreneurs in aviation. At the press conference announcing the donation, Curtis stood behind a podium in a simple navy suit. No hoodie this time. His cheek had healed. His voice was steady. This money didn't come from my pocket. It came from bigotry. I'm sending it where it'll do the most good, into the futures of young people who'll build a better world than the one I walked through that day. The room erupted in applause. And one final note. Officer Ronald Bates. An internal affairs review found that Bates had acted on Brenda's false report without performing basic due diligence. It didn't check the aircraft registration. It didn't call the FBO. He didn't ask a single follow-up question before moving to detain the owner of the plane. It received a formal reprimand. Mandatory de-escalation training. Mandatory bias awareness certification. A note in his permanent file. But Bates did something his department didn't require. He sat down and wrote a personal letter of apology to Curtis Henderson. 2 pages, handwritten. He acknowledged what he'd done, what he'd failed to do, and what he planned to change. Curtis read the letter at his kitchen table. He folded it carefully. And he accepted the apology. Because accountability, real accountability, was all he'd ever asked for. So where are they now? Curtis Henderson went back to work the following Monday. Same hoodie, same jeans, same quiet confidence that had carried him through 30 years of boardrooms, tarmacs, and people who looked at his skin before they looked at his credentials. But something had changed. Not in him. In the world around him. The incident on the Gulf Stream became a turning point. Not just for Curtis, but for an entire industry that had looked the other way for far too long. Within 6 months, Curtis established the Henderson Foundation. Its mission was simple. Open doors in aviation for people of color. Scholarships for flight school, mentorship programs pairing young black entrepreneurs with executives in aerospace, grants for minority-owned aviation startups. The foundation's first class had 42 students. By the second year, that number tripled. Curtis was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on racial profiling in private aviation and travel. He sat behind a microphone in a wood-paneled hearing room in Washington, D.C., and told his story to a row of senators. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table. He spoke the same way he'd spoken to Brenda on that plane. Calm, measured, and impossible to ignore. I was slapped on my own aircraft, he said. But I had cameras. He had lawyers. He had resources. What happens to the man who doesn't? The room was silent. That question, what happens to the man who doesn't, became the foundation's unofficial motto. It was printed on t-shirts, painted on murals, quoted in editorials. It became a rallying cry for people who understood that Curtis's story ended in justice, but that most stories like his don't. Derek Moore was promoted to president of Pinnacle Aero's newly created charter division. The division was built with one guiding principle. Every client, regardless of what they look like, will be treated with dignity from the moment they arrive. No exceptions. No excuses. Derek kept a framed screenshot of Brenda's termination email on his office wall. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. Esquilane private charter survived, barely, after losing over $40 million in contracts, a complete leadership overhaul, and 18 months of brutal public scrutiny. The company restructured under new management. They implemented the most aggressive diversity and accountability program in the private aviation industry. It didn't erase what happened. But it was a start. And Brenda Lawson? She completed her 18 months of probation. She completed her 300 hours of community service. She completed the court-mandated bias rehabilitation program. Her aviation career was over. Permanently. The lifetime industry ban made sure of that. Public records show she relocated out of state, changed her phone number, deleted all social media. No further public incidents were reported. So many people said she got what she deserved. So many people said the punishment was too harsh. But the footage didn't lie. The cameras didn't have an opinion. They just showed what happened. And what happened was a woman who saw a black man on a private jet, and decided, before he spoke a single word, that he didn't belong there. She didn't ask questions. She didn't listen to answers. She didn't look at the evidence. She looked at his skin. And she made her choice. That choice cost her everything. All right. Listen. Yeah, the story? That part's made up. But that feeling, like people already judging you before you even say anything? Yeah. That's real. That happens every day. And that part? Yeah, it kind of hurts. So forget all that. Real question is, when you see that happen, what do you do? I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. What would you have done in Curtis's seat? Would you have stayed that calm? Would you have kept your composure while someone laughed in your face, questioned your identity, lied to the police, and then slapped you, all on your own property? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if this story made you feel something, anger, frustration, anything at all, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Storysphere so you don't miss the next one. Because justice doesn't always come in 8 minutes. But it should always come.